Hi, I'm Matt with Artista Music. This lesson, we're going to go over the chromatic scale. What is the chromatic scale? The chromatic scale is an easy way for us to name all the notes that are on the fretboard on the guitar. Now, I know that seems like a very overwhelming and daunting task, but that's okay. We're actually going to learn a little bit of music theory that's going to help better explain how we can easily name all the notes on the fretboard. Now, to better explain the chromatic scale, we're actually going to take a break from the guitar. I know that seems kind of weird, right? Because you're taking guitar lessons. We're actually going to use the piano as a reference point on explaining the chromatic scale. Well, why would we do that? Well, most music theory has been put pen to paper by piano players. Now, the piano is a great visual reference to better explain in detail what the chromatic scale is actually made of. I know that sounds complicated. Let's make it easy. Let's take a look at the piano. Now, this is a familiar image on what a piano keyboard actually looks like. It's got white keys and then black keys. The black keys are arranged in groups of 2 and groups of 3. So let's dive in to see what the white keys are actually telling us. The white keys are arranged in the musical alphabet. The musical alphabet consists of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So the white keys are actually depicting all those notes in the musical alphabet that are natural. What do I mean by natural? They're not sharps and they're not flats. So let's get a little bit of a reference point because it's sort of hard to find out which note is where. Take a look at the 2 black keys. We're going to call those chopsticks because there's 2 of them. The letter that chopsticks begins with is the letter C. Therefore, that white key that's just before the 2 black keys, or the chopsticks, is a C. Now, since we talked about the white keys being natural notes, that means the next white key is D, then followed by E. Now, do you see how handy that is? Having those black keys in the way that they are really helps visualize where we are on the piano. Now, I know I'm explaining a lot of piano, not too much guitar, but don't worry, towards the end of the video, we're actually going to take all that we've learned and put it to the fretboard. For the 3 black keys, we're actually going to reference those as a fork. Now, fork begins with the letter F. That means the white key before the fork, or the 3 black keys, is an F note. We can test that out by going back to our chopsticks. Remember that white key beforehand was a C. Let's follow the musical alphabet through the white keys. C, D, E, F. Now that means after that, we have the letter G, or a G note. Now I want to pause right there and just explain something. The musical alphabet only consists of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's no H note, there's no other notes like that, but what does that mean? What do we do after we've reached G? We just simply start the alphabet all over again. So after that G note, we then go to A, B, and then C. You'll notice that that white key that we just landed on, our next C, is right before the 2 black keys, the chopsticks. That further confirms our theory here. Now, what about the black keys though? Because those obviously made sound. We've all touched a piano before. So what are those? We're going to call those in-between notes. These are notes that are not quite the previous note and not quite the next note, but they are notes in themselves. Now, we're going to talk about direction. The direction we're going to go to is from left to right. I'm going to introduce you to sharp notes. So let's take a look at that first black key that's in our chopsticks. We know the note before it is a C. Now, when we talked about how it's not quite the previous note or the next note, it's a sharp key. That note is a C sharp because it's not quite a C and it's not quite a D. It's just slightly sharpened or higher than the C note. Let's follow down to D. The next black key is in between the D and the E. That note is not quite a D and it's not quite an E. It's a D sharp. Do you notice a pattern? We name the sharp note after the previous regular note. The C sharped is named C sharp because the previous note was a C. D sharped is named D sharp because the previous note is a D. Now, that sort of makes it a little bit easier, especially when you're trying to name your sharp notes. Now, remember, this is all directional. We're going up higher in the chromatic scale. So whenever you're going higher, you're going to reference sharp notes. Now, here's another thing you'll notice. E and F don't have a black key in between them. Let's take a look at that and explain it. So you'll notice there's no black key between E and F. That's because in the chromatic scale, there's no E sharp. So we go right from E to F. Now we find ourselves at that F note that's right before our fork, or those three black keys. So let's implement what we've learned prior with our chopsticks. That black key is going to be a sharp, and since the previous note is an F, it's going to be an F sharp. Let's do this again. From our G note, we see it's followed by a black key, which means it's going to be a sharp. Since we know we named the sharp keys after the previous white key or regular notes, it's going to be a G sharp. Next we have A, followed by a black key, so that will be an A sharp, because we named that sharp note after the previous note, which is an A. And now we see we have B. But you'll notice there's no black key between B and C. That's because in the chromatic scale, there's no B sharp. We go right from B to C. Now here's the fun part. Let's put what we've learned to the fretboard. So for this exercise, we're going to stay on the 6th string just to make things a little bit easier. So what we're going to do first is name the open string, or the open 6th string. Let's take a look. So we know that the open 6th string is named the E string. From our string names and numbers video, you'll understand that it's named E because that's the note that that string makes. So as a starting point, we're going to use the note E. Now, remember the visual that we gave with the piano keyboard. We go E, and then the next note on that keyboard was an F because there's no E sharp. So we go E, and then the next note is F. Now remember, the note after F was a black key. It was a sharp, and we named the sharp after the previous note. So this now becomes an F sharp. One more time. E, F, F sharp. Now you'll notice I didn't start with C, right? I started with E. Because music theory is a very sort of rigid sort of process, and it has a lot of patterns to it, you can easily find the pattern as long as you know where you're starting from. Since we know we're starting on the E string, and the open 6th string makes an E note, we can look at the piano keyboard, find that E note, and name the notes from there, each time that we go up to the next fret. So let's continue. We went from E, F, to F sharp. Now we're going to name G. So the previous note, which was on the 2nd fret, was an F sharp. Right? Let's do that one more time. E, F, F sharp. The next note on the keyboard was a white key, and that is G, because remember, everything's in alphabetical order. So this is G. G was followed by a black key, which means it is G sharp for the next note. Now, the next note is at A. A was followed by a black key, so that is A sharp. Then it was followed by B. Now remember, there was no black key between B and C, so the next note is followed by C. And then we remember our chopsticks. We have a C sharp. Then we have D. Then we have D sharp. And that D sharp was followed by E. So what was I doing when I was going up the neck of the guitar? I was visualizing the piano keyboard. I'm using that as a reference. Now, since I started at E, I remembered there's no black key after E, which means the next note will be F. And then I've pictured the next black key. Remember, the F is before the fork. So I knew I had 3 sharps coming up. So I had F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp. And then when I got to B, I remembered there was no black key between B and C, which means the next note is a C. And then I remembered my chopsticks, and then I ended at E. So that's why I use the piano to teach you the chromatic scale for the guitar. It gives you a really rich visual. It also kind of gives you a bonus piano lesson. Now, we've broken up this video into 3 parts to sort of help you better digest the whole chromatic scale. It's a lot of information, and this is the first time you're really being introduced to music theory. So take the time and just practice knowing how the piano is laid out, and then practicing taking that information and applying it to the fretboard on your 6th string. Well, why do I want you just to practice on the 6th string? Well, we're not fully done yet explaining the chromatic scale. So just practice those notes on the 6th string and then join me in the next video.